Hello everyone. I am the storyteller, and I'm here to help you unwind and drift off into a peaceful sleep. I know many of you use this video to help you relax, so before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more soothing stories. And I'm curious, where are you watching from right now? What time is it in your part of the world? Feel free to share in the comments below. Now, get comfortable, settle in, and let's start this journey together. Take a deep breath, and relax.
Story: The Phantom Driver. It was the dead of night when I first saw the headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought nothing of it, just another vehicle on the empty stretch of highway I had been driving on for hours. I had been pushing myself to get home before dawn, the monotonous hum of the tires on the asphalt and the lonely flicker of the road signs being the only company. My eyelids felt like sandpaper, each blink harder to open than the last. I needed sleep, but I also needed to keep going. It was well past midnight, and the highway had been completely deserted for miles. I was on the final leg of a cross-country drive, an exhausting journey that had already taken me through endless miles of flat, featureless land. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, trying to make out the shape of the vehicle behind me. It was a large truck, its headlights slicing through the dark like twin beams of sharp light. But what struck me as odd was how long it had been following me. The truck hadn't been there a few minutes ago. There was no sound of an engine overtaking me, no indication it had been approaching from a distance. It simply appeared, almost as if it materialized out of the darkness behind me. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, heart thumping as I squinted into the mirror. The truck's headlights grew brighter, its cab looming large in my reflection. It was way too close. My foot instinctively pressed harder on the gas pedal, but no matter how much I sped up, the truck matched my pace perfectly. I cursed under my breath, my anxiety growing. What was going on? Was I just too tired? Had I missed something? I tapped the brakes lightly, hoping the driver would get the hint and back off. Nothing. If anything, the truck seemed to inch closer, almost as if it were daring me to do something. "Come on, just pass me already," I muttered, swerving slightly to the right lane. The truck did not pass. It stayed right on my tail, almost as if it was intentionally blocking me from moving. I could practically feel the weight of the massive vehicle pushing against me. My breath caught in my throat. This was not normal. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Was this some kind of road rage? A drunk driver trying to intimidate me? Or something worse? I pressed my foot down harder, watching the speedometer climb, 70, 75, 80 miles per hour. Still, the truck didn't drop behind. It stayed right there, keeping pace without any effort. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I gripped the wheel with white knuckles. The truck was a monster in the mirror, its grille just inches from my bumper. My pulse pounded in my ears. I couldn't keep this up. I had to do something. Ahead, I spotted a sign for a rest stop, barely visible in the distance. Without thinking, I made a split-second decision. I had to get off the road, find somewhere safe. I needed to get to a place where there were other people, safety in numbers, right? I took the exit sharply, my tires screeching against the pavement. The truck followed. I could hear it behind me, even as I turned onto the winding road leading to the rest area. My heart rate skyrocketed. I cursed again, my hands shaking as I struggled to navigate the sharp curves in the road. The rest stop parking lot came into view, its solitary flickering streetlight casting Eerie shadows on the pavement. I pulled into a spot near the restroom building and killed the engine. My breath caught in my throat as the truck's headlights flooded my rearview mirror. I squeezed my eyes shut. The world felt like it was spinning. The headlights, bright and blinding, seemed to inch closer. This was it. Whatever was about to happen, it was going to happen now. Seconds passed. Then silence. I slowly opened my eyes and turned around. The parking lot was empty. The truck, gone. No headlights, no rumble of the engine. Just darkness and the faint buzz of the streetlight above. My heart was still racing, my chest tight with confusion and dread. Had I imagined it? Had I hallucinated the entire thing? I sat frozen in the car, the cold sweat sticking to my skin, my mind struggling to process the event. I couldn't explain what had just happened. My eyes scanned the empty parking lot. No sign of the truck. No trace that it had ever been there. I decided to get out of the car, my legs shaky as I stepped onto the pavement. The cool night air hit my face, and for a moment, it helped clear my head. I walked a few laps around the parking lot, half expecting the truck to reappear, but there was nothing. No sign of any other vehicle. Just the stillness of the night. I wasn't sure if I felt relieved or more terrified. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of the experience. Had I really seen a truck? Was I just exhausted? Or had I stumbled onto something much darker? I tried to calm myself. I'd made it here safely. That was what mattered. I couldn't stay on edge forever. I climbed back into the car and reclined the seat, hoping to get some sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt that unsettling presence again, the rumble of an engine in the distance. I jerked awake each time, convinced the truck was coming back. But it never did. By the time the sky began to lighten, I gave up on sleep. I needed coffee, something to keep me going the last stretch of the drive home. I started the car and eased back onto the highway, constantly checking the rearview mirror. My nerves were shot, and each car that passed made my heart race. But none of them were the truck. About an hour later, I pulled into a 24-hour diner just off the highway. The parking lot was half full, a welcome sight after the desolate stretches of road I had been on. I walked into the diner, the bell above the door jingling. A few heads turned in my direction, but they quickly returned to their meals and conversations. I sat down at a booth by the window, keeping an eye on my car parked outside. The waitress came over with a coffee pot in hand. She raised an eyebrow at my disheveled appearance. "Rough night?" she asked, filling my cup. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "You could say that," I muttered, trying to steady my breath. "Had a bit of a scare on the highway." The waitress glanced at me curiously. "What happened?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain. How could I tell her about a phantom truck that chased me down the road, only to vanish without a trace? "There was this truck," I began, my voice low. "It followed me for miles, right on my bumper. When I pulled over at a rest stop, it just disappeared. Like it was never there." Her eyes flickered with recognition, and she leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "You're not the first to come through here with a story like that." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "There's been a handful of drivers in the past few months, all shaken up, talking about a truck like that. It always happens at night, always on that same stretch you came in on." My blood ran cold. "Did they see who was driving it?" She shook her head. "That's the thing. No one ever sees a driver. The truck always disappears. Without a trace. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What do you think it means? She shrugged, her expression grim. I don't know. But there's been a string of robberies on that highway. Cars abandoned, drivers gone missing. The police haven't been able to catch whoever's behind it. I felt the weight of her words sink in. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. A phantom truck, disappearing drivers, unsolved robberies. It was like something out of a nightmare. Has anyone reported this to the police? I asked. She nodded. A few have. But without any evidence, and with the truck always disappearing, let's just say the police aren't taking it too seriously. I leaned back in my seat, trying to digest the information. A part of me felt relieved that I wasn't the only one who had experienced this, but a larger part of me was terrified. What was really happening out there, on that lonely stretch of highway? The waitress must have seen the fear in my eyes. She reached out and patted my hand. Look. You made it here safe. That's what matters. My advice? Stick to driving during the day if you can. And if you see that truck again, get somewhere public as fast as you can. I nodded, grateful for her advice and the comforting words. She stood to get back to work. But I called after her. Wait, I said, my voice shaky. You said there had been robberies, missing drivers, but I wasn't robbed. The truck didn't stop when I pulled over. Why would it chase me? She turned back, a serious expression on her face. Maybe you got lucky. Or maybe. They were just scouting, learning your habits, your reactions. For next time. Her words lingered in the air long after she had walked away. I sat there for a long time, nursing cup after cup of coffee, watching the sunrise slowly light up the diner. The normalcy of it all helped to ground me, reminding me that the world wasn't all dark highways and phantom trucks. But as I left the diner and hit the road again, the unease never fully left me. I drove the rest of the way home, the highway now less menacing in the daylight, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Somewhere, out there, the driver of that ghost truck was waiting for another opportunity. Weeks passed, and the intensity of that night slowly faded. I avoided the highway at night. But the fear subsided. That was, until I saw a news report one evening. A car had been found. Abandoned on that same stretch of highway, the driver missing. Witnesses had reported seeing a large truck in the area just before the disappearance. A chill ran down my spine. Had I really escaped that night? Or had I just postponed the inevitable? Now, every set of headlights in my rearview mirror makes me flinch. Every truck that passes sends my heart racing. The once peaceful solitude of a late-night drive has been shattered, replaced by a gnawing fear. I know one thing for sure, I'll never look at an empty highway the same way again. Because now, I know that sometimes, in the dead of night, those highways aren't as empty as they seem. And the things that lurk in the darkness don't always stay there. Every time I step outside, my eyes instinctively search for trucks. Regular vehicles don't faze me, but whenever I see bright headlights in my rearview mirror, a cold feeling creeps in, like they're watching me. I know it's probably just paranoia, but it never goes away. 1 week after the diner incident, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Though I could drive during the day without anything strange happening, at night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being stalked by that phantom truck. In my dreams, I still saw the blinding lights and heard the rumbling engine echoing in the darkness, making it impossible to sleep soundly. That day, I decided to do a little digging. I tried searching for any information on robberies along similar stretches of road, hoping to find a clue or explanation for the strange events. I scoured car forums, online groups, anything that might reveal a pattern, but most of what I read mirrored my own experience: drivers being tailgated, phantom trucks disappearing. Disappearances with no answers. One evening, as I sat at home, scrolling through old posts on a forum, an unexpected message popped up in my inbox. It was from an unknown user, no name, just a short line. "You're not the only one." I exhaled slowly, a familiar sense of dread creeping in. At first, I thought it was just a prank. But there was something about this message that felt different. Before I could respond, another message appeared. "Be careful. If you've seen the truck, don't go back." I felt like I had been pulled into something far deeper than I could understand. It was as if I had unwittingly entered a dangerous game, one whose rules were unclear to me. The next day, I decided to heed the advice of the mysterious person in the chat. I wasn't going to drive down that stretch of road at night anymore. But life, like a persistent whirlpool, always seemed to drag me back to those dark roads. Despite my best intentions to stay away, sometimes work and other commitments forced me to drive through that same place. One chilly October evening, I found myself behind the wheel again, heading straight for the road I feared. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, quickly blotting out any stars. The world around me was swallowed by the murk, leaving me feeling suffocated, like the darkness was closing in. I told myself it would be different this time, that I wouldn't see that truck again. But the feeling of being watched never fully left. As I navigated a sharp turn, I saw it again, behind me, a truck. A massive rig, its headlights blinding in the rearview mirror, and it was right on my tail. Cold fear swept over me. No. How could it find me again? After everything? Each time I changed lanes, the truck mirrored my movements, staying right behind me. I floored the gas pedal, hoping to outrun it, but no matter how fast I went, the truck kept pace. Its engine a constant, oppressive roar. Suddenly, I recalled the waitress's words: "If you see it again, get to a public place fast." I couldn't take any chances. I needed to get away, to find safety, anything to break the cycle of terror. I saw a rest stop up ahead, and without thinking, I veered off the highway. My hands were trembling as I pulled into the deserted lot, under a single, flickering streetlight. The emptiness of the place was suffocating, but at least I wasn't on that highway anymore. I parked my car, engine off, but the truck's headlights were still reflected in my rearview mirror, blinding me. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart beat loud in my ears. This was it. Whatever was going to happen next would happen now. Seconds ticked by, then, nothing. The lights in my mirror disappeared. Slowly, I opened my eyes and turned around. The parking lot was empty. No truck. No headlights. Just darkness, and the soft hum of the streetlight above me. I sat there, frozen, for what felt like hours. My mind struggled to make sense of what had just happened. Had I imagined it all? Was I so exhausted that I hallucinated a truck tailing me for miles? I wasn't sure. Eventually, I gathered the courage to step out of my car. The cool night air hit my face, clearing my head a bit. I walked around the parking lot, half expecting the truck to reappear. But there was nothing. No sign it had ever been there. As the adrenaline began to fade, fatigue crept in. I climbed back into my car, reclined the seat, and closed my eyes, hoping to get some rest before I continued on my journey. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time I started to drift off, I jerked awake, sure I could hear the rumble of an engine. The sky was just beginning to lighten when I finally gave up on sleep. I needed coffee if I was going to finish the drive home. I started the car and merged back onto the highway, my eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror. The highway was still eerily empty. My nerves were shot. Every vehicle I saw made my heart rate spike, but none of them were the truck that had chased me. About an hour later, I spotted a 24-hour diner just off the highway. The parking lot was half full, a welcome sight after the emptiness of the night. I pulled in, desperate for caffeine and human contact. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in. A few heads turned, but no one seemed to pay much attention. I slid into a booth near the window, still able to keep an eye on my car and the highway beyond. A waitress approached, coffee pot in hand. "Rough night?" she asked, eyeing my disheveled appearance as she filled my mug. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. "You could say that." I hesitated. How could I explain what had happened without sounding crazy? I had a bit of a scare on the highway, I said, finally. She raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" I took a deep breath, preparing myself. There was this truck. It followed me for miles, riding my bumper. When I pulled over at a rest stop, it just vanished. Her expression changed. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She glanced around before leaning in a little closer. "You're not the first to tell me something like that," she said, in a low voice. My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" She sighed and slid into the seat across from me. "In the past few months, a handful of drivers have stopped in here, all shaken up about a truck that chased them on that stretch of highway. Always at night. Always on the same stretch." I leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "Did they see who was driving it?" She shook her head. "That's the thing. No one ever sees a driver. And the truck always disappears without a trace." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you think it means?" She shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "I don't know. But there's been a string of robberies on that highway lately. Cars found abandoned. Drivers missing. Police haven't been able to catch whoever's behind it." My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. A phantom truck. Disappearing drivers. Unsolved robberies. It felt like something out of a nightmare. "Has anyone reported the truck to the police?" I asked. She nodded. "A few have. But without any evidence and with the truck always vanishing. Well, let's just say the police aren't taking it too seriously." I sat back, processing everything she'd said. Part of me felt a little better knowing I wasn't the only one who'd had this experience, that I wasn't just losing my mind. But a larger part of me was terrified. What was really happening out there on that lonely stretch of highway? The waitress must have seen the fear in my eyes. She reached out and patted my hand. "Look. You made it here safe. That's what matters." My advice? Stick to driving during the day if you can. And if you see that truck again, get somewhere public as fast as you can. I nodded, grateful for her kindness and the warning. She stood to return to her work, but a thought struck me. "Wait," I called after her. "You said there have been robberies, missing drivers." But I wasn't robbed. The truck didn't even stop when I pulled over. "Why?" She turned back, a grim expression on her face. Maybe you got lucky. Or maybe, they were just scouting. Learning your habits, your reactions. For next time. Her words hung in the air long after she'd walked away. I sat there for a long time, nursing cup after cup of coffee, watching the sunrise slowly illuminate the diner. The normalcy of it all helped to ground me, reminding me that the world wasn't all dark highways and phantom trucks. But as I left the diner and hit the road again, the unease never fully left me. I drove the rest of the way home, the highway now less menacing in the daylight, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Somewhere, out there, the driver of that ghost truck was waiting for another chance. I made it home without further incident, but the experience stayed with me. I found myself researching highway robberies, looking for any connections, any clues. I even considered reporting what happened to the police, but always stopped short. What could I tell them that wouldn't sound completely insane? Weeks passed, and the intensity of that night slowly faded. I still avoided driving that stretch of highway after dark, but the constant fear subsided. Life went on. Then, about a month later, I saw a news report that made my blood run cold. A car had been found abandoned on that same highway. The driver was missing. Witnesses had reported seeing a large truck in the area just before the disappearance. As I stared at the TV screen, a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't help but wonder, had I really escaped that night, or had I just postponed the inevitable? The highway stretched out before me, dark and empty, but now every set of headlights in my rearview mirror made me flinch. Every truck that passed made my heart race. The once peaceful solitude of a late-night drive had been shattered, replaced by a constant, gnawing fear. I knew one thing for certain, I would never look at an empty highway the same way again. Because now, I knew that sometimes, in the dead of night, those highways aren't as empty as they seem. And the things that lurk in the darkness don't always stay hidden. The months that followed were a blur of uncertainty. It wasn't that I forgot about the phantom truck, it was always there, lurking in the back of my mind, a shadow I couldn't shake off. I avoided that stretch of highway as best I could, but sometimes life has a way of pushing you toward things you're trying to outrun. It happened again. I was on the road one evening, headed back from a meeting that had run late. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, and the highway felt quiet, peaceful. Even I felt almost silly for worrying about the phantom truck. After all, it had been a while since that last encounter. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe it had been just a freak occurrence. A string of coincidences. I reached the same stretch of road. The one that had become my nightmare. I told myself it would be fine. I was just driving home, like any other day. But as the sun sank lower and the night crept in, I started to feel the weight of that dread again, slowly creeping up on me like a storm. Then, the headlights appeared. Not in the distance, not at the edge of my vision, but right behind me. I jerked my head up, my heart skipping a beat. It was unmistakable. The truck. I couldn't see its details, but I could feel it there, massive and ominous. I gripped the steering wheel harder, my knuckles turning white. No. Not again. I hit the accelerator, trying to outrun it. But the truck didn't relent. It stayed close, matching my speed, just as it had the first time. My palms were sweating now, my mind racing. I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't get caught in that nightmare again. I glanced in my side mirror. It was closer now. I could see the grille, the massive frame of the truck, its headlights glowing like twin eyes in the darkness. The world felt smaller, suffocated. Under the weight of that truck's presence. I could hear my pulse in my ears, louder than the roar of the engine. In a panic, I veered off the highway and took an exit, hoping to find a rest area. I remembered the advice I had been given: get somewhere public. But there was no rest stop. There was nothing but more highway stretching out before me, dark and endless. I kept driving, desperately trying to stay ahead of the truck. My mind screamed for answers. But all I could focus on was the truck that seemed to appear out of nowhere, chasing me down. Again. Then, just as I thought I could outrun it, the headlights flickered. They didn't disappear, not entirely, but they dimmed, as if the truck had suddenly lost interest. I looked up, my heart still pounding in my chest, and the truck was gone. Vanished into the dark night like it never existed. I pulled over to the side of the road, breathing heavily. My heart was racing, and I could barely make sense of what had just happened. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty highway. Had I imagined it? Was I losing my mind? But then I remembered the news report. The abandoned cars. The missing drivers. The phantom truck that never had a driver. It was all connected. And I had just become a part of that story again. The next day, I tried to push it all out of my mind. I convinced myself that it was just another scare, that I was overthinking everything. But I couldn't forget the feeling of being watched. Of the truck tailing me once more, like some kind of predator stalking its prey. That night, unable to shake the images in my head, I decided to visit the diner again. The waitress, the one who had told me about the disappearances and the strange truck, she was the only person who might understand what was happening. I walked into the diner, the familiar jingle of the bell overhead making me feel like I had entered a different world, one that felt strangely comforting in its normalcy. The waitress was there, just as she had been before, refilling a customer's coffee. She saw me, and without a word, she nodded toward an empty booth in the corner. I slid into the seat across from her. "You're back," she said softly, her voice just above a whisper. I nodded, feeling a chill run through me. "I saw it again," I said, my words coming out shaky. "The truck. It followed me." She didn't look surprised. Instead, she just gave me a knowing look, one that spoke volumes. Without saying a word. "You're not the first," she said quietly, pouring me a cup of coffee without asking. Her hands were steady, even though I could see the tension in her eyes. "You won't be the last." I leaned in closer, barely able to breathe. "What is it? Why is this happening? What does it mean?" She hesitated, looking over her shoulder as if ensuring no one else could hear. She then leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's not just a truck. It's a warning. Whoever, or whatever, it is, it's hunting people, and it's not about the truck itself." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean? You said it was connected to robberies, to missing drivers." She nodded. "It is. But there's something more. This truck, it doesn't just appear. It shows up when it knows something. When it senses weakness." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Weakness? What do you mean?" The waitress paused again, looking into my eyes. "It's like it's waiting for people who've been through something. Trauma. Loss. The kind of people who are easy to take. It hunts people who are on the edge, who are already broken." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "And what happens to them?" Her eyes were heavy with unspoken knowledge. Some are never seen again. Others, well, you can't trust the stories. The ones who survive, they say the truck doesn't just follow. It learns. It knows you. And it waits. It waits until you're vulnerable enough to take you. I sat back, my mind racing. It all made sense now. The truck wasn't just a random event. It was part of something bigger, something more terrifying. And I had somehow become a part of that something. The waitress reached across the table, her hand lightly resting on mine. I'm sorry. I wish I could help, but the best advice I can give you is to stay off that highway. For good. Don't try to understand it. Just run. I nodded, the weight of her words settling heavily on my chest. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew she was right. There was no explanation that would make this make sense, no reason I could find that would clear the fear in my chest. It was just a reality I had to accept. Weeks passed, and I did everything I could to avoid the highway, the truck, and the sense of impending doom. I stayed close to home, took new routes, and told myself I was safe. But safety is an illusion. I knew that now. One evening, as I was driving through a quiet town a few hours from home, I found myself on a dark road that felt too familiar. The fog rolled in thick, and the streetlights were too spaced out. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I knew I had made a mistake. I looked in my rearview mirror. And there it was. The truck. Coming up behind me like it had been waiting for me all along. This time, I didn't try to outrun it. The truck kept coming, closer and closer, until it was right on my tail. I felt that deep, unsettling feeling of being hunted. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, it slowed. The headlights dimmed, and the truck drifted away from me, leaving me alone on the road. But I knew it wasn't over. It had only let me go for now. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I had a feeling deep inside me, this wasn't the last time I'd encounter that truck. Not by a long shot. As the truck disappeared into the darkness, I realized one thing, the truck wasn't just hunting people. It was waiting for them to understand. Waiting for them to realize that the highway wasn't empty. And once you knew that, once you understood, there was no escaping. The truck was always there. Watching. Waiting. It had already found me once. And I knew it would find me again. But the real question was, when it did, would I be ready? It's strange how time works. The weeks after that encounter were a blur of fear and paranoia. Yet I found myself driving again. I couldn't help it. Life doesn't stop just because you've had an unsettling experience. I tried to bury the memories of that truck, to move on like everyone told me to, but the truth is, the shadow of that night never really left. I started to tell myself that it was all in my head. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the truck was just a figment of my overactive imagination. I tried to convince myself that the disappearances and strange happenings were just coincidental, isolated events. But deep down, I knew the truth. The truck was real. And it was waiting. It happened again, of course. It was late, just after midnight, and I was driving along a stretch of road I hadn't been on in months. The air outside felt thick, the kind of oppressive humidity that made it feel like the world was holding its breath. I didn't want to be on that road, not after everything I'd learned. But something pushed me, maybe it was the feeling of normalcy that came with the hum of The tires on the asphalt, the familiarity of the long, empty stretches of highway. At first, I didn't notice it. The road ahead seemed quiet. Peaceful, even. The truck was a ghost. In my memory, a phantom I had tried to forget. But then, out of nowhere, the headlights appeared. At first, I thought it was just another car, maybe someone traveling through the night like me. But as it grew closer, I felt that chill run down my spine again, that same weight pressing against my chest. I couldn't see the truck clearly, but I didn't need to. I knew it instantly. It was the same truck. The one that had haunted me before. It was just as large, just as imposing, its headlights like twin eyes glaring through the darkness. I looked in my rearview mirror, and there it was, tailing me, following me like it had before. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This time, I didn't panic. I didn't try to outrun it. I knew now that running wasn't the answer. This truck wasn't just some random driver, it was something far worse. It was a predator. And it had been hunting me all along. I tried to stay calm, focusing on the road ahead. The truck was right behind me now, almost. Too close. I could feel its presence in the air, like the weight of 1,000 eyes on my back. But instead of speeding up or swerving, I slowed down. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe I thought if I showed it I wasn't afraid, it would leave me alone. Maybe I was just exhausted, my body too tired to keep running. But I knew, deep in my bones, that I couldn't outrun it forever. The truck stayed with me, not speeding up, not slowing down, but always just behind me. 4 miles, it followed. I couldn't see anything but its headlights in my mirror, those eerie, unblinking lights that seemed to burn into my very soul. And then, as if by some unspoken signal, the truck finally pulled up beside me. I turned my head to the left, and my breath caught in my throat. There, in the driver's seat, was nothing. Just empty space. No driver. No figure at the wheel. The truck was alone. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. This wasn't just a haunted truck. This was something else entirely, something impossible. And in that moment, the realization hit me like a thunderclap, the truck wasn't chasing me anymore. It was waiting for me to realize I was already a part of it. My car began to shake as the truck edged closer. It was no longer a physical thing, something to be outrun or avoided. It was a part of me. My thoughts, my fears, my darkest memories, they were all tied to that truck now, feeding it, keeping it alive. A sudden urge gripped me. My foot hovered over the brake. For a split second, a voice inside my head whispered, "Stop. Just stop. Let it take you. Let it finish what it started." I fought it. I fought against the urge with every ounce of strength I had, but the voice was louder now, insistent. The truck was no longer just an object chasing me, it was a force. Something inextricably linked to me. It had been following me for a reason, and now, as the highway stretched out endlessly before us, I understood that reason. I slammed my foot onto the brake. The truck surged forward, its headlights blinding me, its engine roaring louder than my own. It felt like the very road itself was crumbling beneath us. The world around me twisted, bending, folding in on itself. I glanced in my rearview mirror, and for the first time, I saw something I didn't expect. There was no truck. There was only darkness. I sat frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. The headlights that had haunted me for so long were gone. The oppressive weight of the truck was lifted. For a fleeting moment, I thought, maybe it was over. Then I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye. A figure. Not in the truck. Not in the rear view. But standing in the middle of the road. A man. Or something that used to be a man. His face was hidden in shadow, but his eyes glowed. They were the same as the truck's headlights, those unblinking, glowing orbs that pierced through the night like a curse. And in that moment, I understood. The truck wasn't just following me. It wasn't just haunting the highway. It was the man. The one who never left the road. The one who had always been waiting. He raised his hand, slowly, pointing toward me. And as I looked at his outstretched finger, I felt the air around me grow colder, the darkness closer, until it pressed against my skin like ice. And then, just like that, everything stopped. The road was empty. The man was gone. The truck was gone. The night was still. I took a deep breath, my pulse still racing, and I glanced at the rearview mirror one last time. There was nothing behind me now. The highway stretched on, empty and silent. I didn't know how long I sat there, frozen, but when I finally drove away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what had happened. The truck was gone. But it would always be there, in the back of my mind, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right time to return. And no matter how far I drove, no matter how much I tried to outrun it, I knew that one day it would find me again.
Hey everyone, Mort here. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to tonight's stories. I really hope you enjoyed them. If you did, it would mean a lot to me if you could drop a like and hit that subscribe button. And if you made it all the way to the end and aren't subscribed yet, well, that'd be awesome too. I put out new videos every week, so I hope you'll stick around. A huge thanks to my amazing members and patrons. You guys rock, and your names are right there on the screen. If you like this video, I think you'll enjoy this one too, so why not give it a watch? Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.